Welcome back to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio, podcast, and television show. I'm your host, Life Coach Brenda Young, and sitting in the guest chair today is Carlee Hayes. She's a registered dietitian and original founder of NutriSense. And Carlee and I today are going to be talking about simple lifestyle strategies to optimize metabolic health. Welcome, Carlee.
Thank you. It's so great to be here. I appreciate you having me.
Yes, welcome to be here. Yes, I'm going to enjoy our conversation today because I'm going to be learning right along with you guys on preventative care for diabetes and metabolic health. So it'll be great. So, all right, so let me give you guys a brief introduction to Carlee. Carlee Hayes is a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and the lead dietitian at NutriSense, a metabolic health company that uses continuous glucose monitoring, also called CGM technology, to provide real-time data to clients. As the original founder of NutriSense, Carlee has worked with thousands of users' data and has a wealth of knowledge on achieving optimal health through metabolic health, weight loss, longevity, and nutrition. She specializes in bariatric nutrition therapy and has helped the company grow from 2 dietitians to a team of over 20 within the first year. Awesome, Carlee. So, as we were talking about before I started recording, we're both reading Dr. Peter Attia's book right now called Outlive. And in there, he says that metabolic health is one of the top priorities that we should have if we want to live to centenarians or live in a health span and not a lifespan. So right off the bat, because I had never actually heard of that term before, and I see that your company is labeled as a metabolic health company. So tell us, Carlee, what exactly is metabolic health and what does this entail? I know one of the prongs of it is diabetes, but I think that it encompasses more things. So can you talk to us about what exactly is metabolic health?
Definitely one of my favorite topics to get into. And shout out to Peter Attia and the Outlive book. If you haven't read that, that's a really great place to get started on all things metabolic health and really level up that knowledge. But when we look at metabolic health, that word sounds a lot like metabolism. So I like to simplify it a little bit and just think about what even is our metabolism and how can we use that information? Because we know now that this is the key to longevity. This is the key to living a healthy lifespan and having a good health span. So when we think about metabolic health, this is kind of this umbrella term that encompasses how our metabolism works. And if we break that down just a little bit more, what that means is your metabolism is how you process energy. This is how your body takes the foods that you eat and all the factors that you put in to your body and uses that to fuel you throughout the day. So if we're looking at metabolism, some of the things that might tell us how our metabolism is doing are what we get in a normal lab draw at our doctor's office, right? So you get a glucose lab, you get your cholesterol, your lipids. Also, your weight, your waist circumference are kind of encompassed in that category. But all of those different metrics just tell us that one thing: how is our metabolism doing? Are we taking the food that we eat and using it efficiently? And the scary statistic that's been thrown out a lot lately is that less than 7% of Americans are metabolically healthy. So like 93% of our population has some sort of issue in the efficiency of their metabolism. And so that's critical, right? That's really, really important for us to look at. And I think the thing that I always want people to know is that you have the power to change your metabolic health, to optimize it and improve it for the future, because from its basic standpoint, this is the things that we're putting into our bodies and doing in our lifestyle every single day that influence that metabolic health. And what NutriSense does specifically is we look at one part of that. We look at glucose or blood sugar, which I think everyone's kind of, this is a buzzword, right? We're all thinking about blood sugar and how to improve our blood sugar. even if we don't have diabetes. And that's because of a couple of reasons. But the first is it's really easy to monitor and it tells you a lot of information. So when we look at blood sugar, this is basically a sign of how our body is taking that food and how it's processing it. And so what I always like to say is our body is really good at keeping glucose or blood sugar, which is the fuel that fuels our body and keeps us going from day to day, in a really stable range, right? And that's just a couple of teaspoons in our body, in our blood at all times. And if we have it kind of spike a little bit too high or even drop a little bit too low, this is a little yellow flag, as I like to call it, or that warning sign that maybe something's off. Maybe there's something in our metabolism that isn't working right, or maybe we're eating in a way that doesn't support our specific body's metabolism. And so we can monitor that and look at it from day to day and see those trends so that we know exactly where to put our attention to keep it in that really, really tight range. Does that kind of answer your question about metabolic?
Yeah, that was great. But I'm reading the book right now, so I'm a little
Yeah.
ahead of maybe I'm probably a little ahead of some of our listeners. So yeah. So what you said a couple of things there that I want to, maybe expand on a little.
Right.
So yes, so glucose in our body is a sign of our metabolic health. I mean, I think Peter talked about, I'm remembering, I could remember it wrong, but he said that we're supposed to have 5 teaspoons or something. And if we have 1 extra teaspoon, then we're diabetic or something. Is that, well, how much is it? Let's do it. Yeah, because you're the nutritionist. How much glucose, and as far as like in teaspoons, are you supposed to have in your blood for you to be not having a metabolic health problem?
Right. Yeah. It's a really, really, really small amount.
Okay. So it's obviously not 5 teaspoons. Maybe it's just 1.
I believe it's 2 teaspoons, but don't fact check me on that one. I believe it's 2. But I think the big point there is that that's a very, very small amount. Right. And I think what we all know, or we should know, is that our body's really smart. It's really adaptive, and it's really good at responding to different things and keeping us in a stable range. That's called homeostasis, right? So it keeps us in this really stable range. But what happens when we have factors in our life, and we all do, that push it outside of that range repeatedly, that's when we run into issues. So if we look at, a normal metabolism, right? If we eat a meal, what's going to happen is that our blood sugar is going to go up, and that's normal. That's exactly what we want to happen. That's a normal impact of having a balanced meal. And what happens then is that we have this hormone, and we can dive into that a little bit more, called insulin, that comes in and helps move that blood sugar from our blood into our cells so that we can use it. And if we have a dysfunctioning metabolism, which again is a lot more common than I think we realize today, what happens is we eat that same meal, our blood sugar goes up, but we don't have the same insulin or that same hormone response to bring it back down into range. So it stays up for longer. We run into all the issues that cascade as a result of that, which we can get into those in detail. But what's happening is we're unable to kind of bring that down and self-regulate. And what's cool about NutriSense, what's cool about monitoring your blood sugar is you can see that, right? If you're monitoring how your blood sugar is doing, you can see how your body responds to every single meal or factor in your life. And then you can proactively address anything that's keeping it up in that range that we don't want to see, to avoid those complications later on. So I always think of glucose as kind of the lowest hanging fruit, right? It tells us so much information about our metabolism and our body. And then it tells us where to put our energy and our focus to make meaningful changes long term.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'm soaking in all this nutrition recently. I'm finished. I'm actually reading at night. I'm reading Stephen Gundry's book. I think the Keto Code it's called. And basically there he talked specifically about what we're going to be talking about later in the show, which is continuous glucose monitoring, because he's saying that you need to know how your body responds to different foods. And when we prick our finger in the morning or whenever you prick it, that's not giving you an idea of continuous. For instance, you just said that, when you eat, you expect your blood sugar to spike. But if you continue monitoring it, you can see if it's going to come down or what is it doing and things like that. But the question I had for someone that's listening and want to understand metabolic health. So is glucose monitoring the main issue in metabolic health? What are the other parts of that? Is it the mitochondria? What's the other parts to that from?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think at the key of that is your mitochondria. That's, that powerhouse of your cell that's kind of processing that energy and influencing how we see that show up in all of these other metrics. So I think, glucose is the main metric that involves metabolic health that I look at and I deal with every single day, but it's by far and away not the only thing that matters. But I think what our healthcare system does, and this is sometimes unfortunate, is we try and silo these things into different categories, right? We have diabetes care and we have blood sugar management, and then we have lipids or like heart health, but really all of those systems are working together. And if we have maybe that little yellow flag, like I mentioned in glucose, that could be affecting all of those other things that influence our metabolism. So all of these systems are working together to support that metabolic health. And if one of them is off, that's going to cause this cascading downstream effect in all of the things that we monitor. So when you look at that metabolic health, glucose is one piece of the puzzle. And, the mitochondria, like you mentioned, is going to be the key that kind of regulates our metabolism and processes all of those factors. But you're going to see that impact multiple areas of health. So if you're seeing differences or like abnormal results in your lipid labs, but you're not seeing those in your glucose, that does not mean that they're not connected, because it's all working together. So I think that's the key thing to consider, is that you want to look at all those factors and then address which ones maybe are a little bit off, but they all work together cohesively, if that answers your question.
Have you been trying to lose weight and can't lose a pound, even though you have tried everything? Well, so did I. So when I heard about NutriSense continuous glucose monitor, I had to give it a try. A CGM, or continuous glucose monitor, monitors which food spike your glucose, as this contributes to weight gain. I have been using my CGM for about 1 month, and the pounds have started to fall off. All I do is scan after each meal. Right now, NutriSense is offering my listeners and friends $50 off your first month. Head over to www.nutrisense.io and use code MYRNAPW. Our website again is www.nutrisense.io and use code MYRNAPW.
Yes, that's good. I know that there were, I remember when he talked about metabolic health, that there was more pieces to the puzzle, but I didn't actually remember what they were, which is basically why I asked you. But yeah, so you're saying that metabolic health includes your heart health as well. Yeah, I guess so. All right.
Yeah.
So now glucose is basically what you guys do. So again, Peter goes into what exactly is diabetes, and he talked about it was really funny where he said that when you get over the 6.5 threshold and you have diabetes, which is when people start, the doctors are going to start taking care of you, but he's saying the pre-diabetes, the people that are the 6.1 or 6.3 like me, I mean, I was at 6.3, I think I'm back down to 6.1 now. I'm supposed to be pre-diabetic, and he says there's so many millions of people that are pre-diabetic, and that you shouldn't wait until you're diabetic in order to address the issue, that you should start addressing it now. So what are some of the common symptoms of pre-diabetes or diabetes that someone that hasn't gone to the doctor and actually gotten their A1C checked can look for in their lives?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think I'll dive back just a little bit and talk about all the metrics that we look at. So you had kind of mentioned the finger prick, and I think that's a really helpful thing just to start with. So when we go to our doctor, right, and I hope everyone's doing that. Annual labs are so important. Make sure you're getting those. But if you've gone, right, you get an A1C and you get a glucose, like fasting finger prick. So those are the two kind of glucose monitor metrics that we see at a normal annual lab doctor's appointment. And so you had kind of alluded to this, which is a really good point, is that when you're doing that fasting glucose lab, that's exactly like it sounds. You're taking that finger prick first thing in the morning when you're fasted, and that's kind of giving you that snapshot in time of what your glucose is doing in that moment. And then the other thing that you'll get is an A1C, which is a 3-month kind of average of what your glucose is doing. And both of those are really helpful. I don't want to discredit any of those, but as you can kind of see, they only give you one side of the picture. They're telling you what your average is and then what your glucose is in one moment. So you're kind of missing all of the nuances in between. If you have a larger spike in blood sugar, your average might capture that a little bit, but it probably won't tell you the specifics about that. So you're kind of missing those day-to-day fluctuations in your blood sugar. And we had talked about how your responses to meals are really important. And everyone's responses to meals is different. So I think that's one thing that's missing kind of in our normal system. And then the other thing that you had mentioned that I know Peter Attia is very passionate about as well, is we have this healthcare system right now that will often wait until things are abnormal or in the red before they flag them, right? So you kind of see this trend of your blood sugars kind of trending upwards. Your doctor says, it's okay, take care of your diet and exercise, do these things. We won't worry about it right now. But if that continues to trend upwards, that's when they make that change. And I think I worked in private practice counseling for a really long time. And that's when I would see people, right? I wouldn't see them when they were trying to prevent that from happening. I would see them when they first got that diagnosis of diabetes and they wanted to manage the condition. But if we think about our metabolism, right? If those things are happening over and over again, that's happening for years, months, decades even before that diagnosis happens. So if we wait until they're abnormal, then we're missing all of those ways that we can prevent that from happening and kind of focus on that proactive care before it gets to that point. And I think that's the thing that we have power over. If you let it get far enough and you let your body kind of get into that disease state, then you have less power. It's still possible to make changes and optimize what you're seeing, but you have a little bit less power to reverse that or make those significant changes. So you're right, prediabetes happens in a large percentage of us. I think it's 38% of adults now have prediabetes, so it's pretty common. But I'm here to tell you that from monitoring my own blood sugar, I had spikes that were higher than quote unquote normal. And this is me as a dietitian thinking I'm doing all the right things and I'm eating well. But I think unless you're looking at how your body is specifically responding to those foods, you don't know. You don't know if your diet is quote unquote right for you. And there's a lot of individuality in what types of foods, carbs do best for each individual person. So that's where I think if you monitor it and you can kind of look at it, you're able to adjust your diet to prevent that from getting to that place in the first place.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, that's very true. So, so what are some of the long-term complications of uncontrolled diabetes or uncontrolled glucose in your blood?
Yeah. Yeah, really good question. And I would say when we're looking at high blood sugar, remember the body's trying to keep it in that really tightly controlled range. And if we are doing things that are pushing it outside of that range repeatedly over time, that's when we start to see those downstream effects that can lead to diabetes. So I always tell people, one poor response to a meal or one blood sugar spike is not going to hurt you, but it's those repeated impacts over time that can ultimately lead to those disease states. So within that, right, if we're having high blood sugar, there are two different ways I like to look at that, right? Short term, what were you going to feel in the short term if you have a high blood sugar response or if your blood sugar is high? And I always tell people, sometimes you feel nothing at all, right? I think this happens to a lot of us as we get into this feeling where this is just normal and you don't notice those small fluctuations or high glucose values. But some people, if you're looking for symptoms, you might experience this as hunger, right? If you have really high fluctuating spikes in glucose or big variability in your glucose labs, this might lead you to feel intense cravings or hunger. So what's happening is your blood sugar is spiking really high and it's coming back down. And those larger fluctuations can trigger your body to think that you're hungry even when you're not. So that's the thing that I always look for is if you're, feeling out of control with your hunger or you're having intense cravings for carbohydrate foods, this can be a sign that you are what we call riding the blood sugar roller coaster. And that just means, your blood sugar is having larger peaks and falls, which can lead you to feeling those symptoms. The other thing you might feel is poor sleep or even anxiety. Sometimes if you're having these larger shifts throughout your day, this can just make you feel not great throughout your day. You kind of feel unsettled, and it can also contribute to poor sleep at night. So again, this is short term, you're not diagnosed with diabetes, but if you are having higher fluctuations, those are some things to look for. And then of course, long term, I think if this is happening over years, over decades, eventually this is going to cause a lot of inflammation in your body, which is going to lead to a lot of oxidative damage and vascular malfunction in your body. And those can ultimately relate to chronic disease over time. So those things take a long time to develop. But again, if you start to notice those short-term symptoms, that might be a sign to take a deeper look, check out your blood sugar, and just monitor it to see what might be going on in those day-to-day fluctuations. So, and to answer your question, sorry, I'm getting there, but for diabetes warning signs, if you do have diabetes or you're concerned you have diabetes, sometimes this presents as like you're urinating a lot, especially at nights. I think that's a big one that I hear a lot. You're really thirsty all the time. You're struggling to lose weight. You've been doing quote unquote all the right things, but your body's just not, losing weight like you used to. I think that's a big symptom. And again, if we look at what metabolism is how your body is processing energy. If you are metabolically unhealthy, you're unable to process the foods that you're eating well, this can lead to that difficulty with losing weight. Then other things, you're hungry a lot, you have blurry vision, all of those things are kind of tied to.
I think is one of them, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question because
Yeah.
I have developed this new thing where I need to have sweets at night, and I was never like that. So is that related to, you think that's related to spiking blood sugar?
It's possible, but I'd want to see the data. So that's what I want to see it.
Well, you just mentioned when you crave sweets, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe that's, I'm just putting it together because all of a sudden I need to have dessert after my meal, and I was never a dessert person.
Yeah, it very well could be. So I think sometimes people just feel very controlled by their hunger, like I'm hungry all the time. And that could be a sign that your blood sugar is just irregulated. It's not kind of in that really stable zone. And remember, when you're having these larger spikes in glucose, your body's going to respond by pumping out insulin to bring that blood sugar down. And that's what we want to do. But sometimes if you have a really, really high spike, your body will overcompensate by producing too much insulin to bring that down. And that can bring your blood sugar a little bit too low. And when your blood sugar is really low, that signals your brain, hey, I need food, I need sugar, I need, really quick acting carbohydrates because I'm feeling kind of not great. So I think that's definitely something that could be happening. The other thing though, sometimes at night, we get into the habit of having sugar as well. Like I think I've been there before, is where you just like, that's my unwind. That's how I relax after the day. This feels really good. So I think there's a lot of factors there, and I'd want to look at your glucose and kind of see what's going on.
Yeah. So let's say that when I'm having this urge to eat sweets, my blood sugar is okay. So let's move now to the continuous glucose monitoring. So let's say that let's talk about what diabetes is. So you've eaten, you've got this glucose in your blood. The insulin is there to get rid of the glucose in your blood and get it to your muscles or get it to your cells. But because you've got diabetes, it's still in the blood, right? So when we have this continuous glucose monitoring, one, it's telling us that the glucose is still in the blood, I'm assuming. And two, like me, let's say that I ate a meal and I have a spike in my blood sugar, but maybe then it dropped and then I have to crave sweets. Take us through what this continuous glucose monitor does with those type of issues. We know that it monitors it, but what does it do?
Yep. Really, really good point. And I do have it here to show you. So we've got, this is a CGM. So this is the actual thing that sticks in your arm. So continuous glucose monitor. And I don't have it opened, but it's, if you've seen it, most people I think have seen this, but it's just a small little, it looks like 2 quarters stacked on top of each other, and you insert it into the back of your arm. It doesn't hurt, but it monitors your blood sugar continuously, per the name, for 2 weeks. And that's really cool because you can see it at all times of day, not just when you're fasting or on average. You see it overnight, you see it for every single meal. And that information is delivered to your cell phone. So for instance, we use our own app, but if you use any CGM, they'll have their own app that you can use. And then in real time, as soon as you scan it or it goes to your phone, you'll see what your glucose is doing in that moment. I think there are a couple things that it can do, or the benefits of the CGM for that reason. The first is that in real time, you are able to see how your decisions impact your metabolism or your blood sugar, right? So I think if we look at all the different things that we do for our health, or say you have a health goal of losing weight, right? Say you are following a specific diet plan or an exercise plan, how long does it take you to see those changes pay off, right? Yeah. You're doing all the hard work, you're putting in the time and the effort, but you might not see those changes for a month, 2 months, right? It depends. It's not that linear process. And I think sometimes that can be really frustrating for you or for anyone trying to make a goal, because it feels like you're putting in the work and not seeing that payoff. And I think the benefit of the CGM is as soon as you make that decision, you see it impact you either in a good way or in a not so good way. And it's that real-time data that helps you first learn. I always say the first couple weeks of wearing a CGM is 90% learning. You're just learning about your body. You're curious. You're trying to see what different foods or activities do to your blood sugar and how that relates to how you feel. And then once you kind of feel good with your data, then it becomes a behavior change piece. It keeps you accountable. You see that change, you know exactly what happened, and you can use that as kind of a reinforcement to stay on a good path and know that you're making the right decisions in the moment. I think those are the big things that are really cool about the CGM. So
yeah, but I still don't get it. So I want to use real experiences so that me and someone's listening can understand. So when you eat, let's say you eat pasta, your blood sugar is going to spike. It spikes for everybody because it's pasta. So what is the CGM telling me? Telling me that when I eat, my blood sugar spikes. So are you saying that somebody might eat pasta and it doesn't affect their blood sugar? I'm still not getting what am I supposed to do with that information, right? And I understand what you're saying about, you're exercising, you think you're eating right, but nothing is happening. You're not losing weight and you want to lose weight. How does the data about my glucose level affect that? So break
really
it down,
break it down a little bit. Got you.
Simon here.
Nope, I got you. It's a lot to take in. But yeah, when you eat a meal, you said it perfectly. Your blood sugar is going to raise and it's going to fall after that spike. And that's a normal, healthy metabolism. So within any single response to a meal, you're going to see a peak and you're going to see it come back down. But really what you're looking for in that CGM data is what does that look like? And there's a lot of small nuances here that I'll try and paint a picture. But what we're looking for is we want that highest value after you eat to be below a certain level. And there's a lot of debate about what that level, that quote unquote level, should be. But for a normal, healthy person, from the research that we've seen and we've done, we want to keep that below a peak of 140. So essentially, that's telling you that's where that homeostatic range is. That's where your body's trying to keep it. And if it's going above that range, that's a sign that maybe that meal didn't work really well for your body, right? If it peaked a little bit higher, that might be a sign that that pasta, hey, we need to adjust that a little bit. So I'll get into maybe some changes that we could make if we have that high spike. So that's first, you're looking at the peak. How high are you going? The other thing you're looking for is how big of a shift you had in your glucose. So we kind of talked about that blood sugar roller coaster, right? If you're having large shifts and then spiking down, that can be a sign that something's not going well or that meal didn't work well for you. Similarly, if you're starting at a really low stage in your blood sugar and then spiking really, really high, that's a big shift. So what that's telling me is, hey, my body responded really strongly to this. This is a big glucose shift and we want to keep it in that stable range. So this might be something I want to pay attention to. How can I reduce the amount of that shift? And then the third and last thing is how quickly that blood sugar came back down to my pre-meal values. So we've already looked at, how big that shift was, what that total peak was, and then how quickly did it come down? And this is essentially telling you, how well did my insulin get me back down to that homeostatic range, right? Was I able to recover from that meal or did I stay really high for really long? And all of those pieces together tell you how your body tolerated that meal. And so again, if you have diabetes, that a little bit of that is out of your control, right? Because your insulin isn't working or responding as well as it should be. But if you're seeing that, then there's definitely some changes you can make in your diet, in your lifestyle to help improve that response. And that's where we hear that term insulin sensitivity a lot. And that's a good thing. That means if you are insulin sensitive, you are sensitive to the effects of insulin and your body's able to bring that back down and kind of keep you in a really good range for whatever meal that you have. If you are insulin resistant, on the other hand, which is the defining characteristic of type 2 diabetes, that means that, hey, your body's trying, right? It's producing that insulin, but we're just not responding like we should. And so either that blood sugar spiking too high or we're staying really high for really long, having big spikes from meals that maybe shouldn't have that big spike. So if we look at that pasta example, and this is where I get really excited because this is where we can make changes and we can try different things and experiment. So say I have that pasta meal and I spike really high, I go above that 140 range, and I know that maybe that was just a larger spike than I want to see. There are definitely some lifestyle or diet changes we can make. And the first one, and you kind of alluded to this, is your carbohydrates. How can you improve either the type of carbohydrate you're having to help your body process that better? Or can you adjust maybe the portion size of that carbohydrate so that it's the right amount for your body? And you did a great job of saying that, when insulin comes in and tells our body to bring that blood sugar down, it's bringing it into our muscles. And that's a huge sink for glucose. That's our storage space for glucose. It's kind of our secret weapon for handling carbs. And so the other thing we can look at is, well, can we add movement or exercise around this meal so that we can use those muscles as a sink for that glucose and kind of help it soak up that from the blood so that it's not staying there for too long. So if we're seeing kind of some differences in the spike, the shift, or the return to baseline, those are some levers we can pull. And there are so many more we can get into, but those are some levers that we can have that control over and optimize how we responded to that meal.
I like that. So I'm glad I asked the question. Now I understand what's going on, because before I was just not understanding what are we going to use this data, or how are we going to use it? So now I get it. So my follow-up question is, you said something really interesting just now, because if you're diabetic, you're insulin resistant. So is this monitoring, is it for people that are pre-diabetic or not diabetic? I mean, officially diabetic? Or why would someone use it that's diabetic already?
Yeah, really, really great question. And I would say it's for every single person. So for NutriSense, right, we work with a lot of people with diabetes. We work with people with pre-diabetes or people that just are trying to learn more about their body and optimize their blood sugar, right? Because we know it's so closely linked to metabolic health, and that's extremely important. So for anyone that is in those categories, this can be helpful. I think what we look at with type 2 diabetes, or why that matters, is that if you are already in a state of type 2 diabetes, that means you probably have some damage to your beta cells in your pancreas that influence how much insulin you can, or how well your insulin is working, right? So that is a limiting factor. But I always tell people with type 2 diabetes, this doesn't mean that your hands are tied. You still have so much power to optimize your diet and keep that blood sugar in your stable range. That is a reason why I think, any person would benefit from monitoring, because you can see how your body's responding, and you can either make proactive changes or you can make changes to optimize what you already are working with. So for someone with type 2 diabetes that might be insulin resistant at baseline, I think if you saw that big spike, that still gives you that same information, right? That tells you, okay, this carbohydrate amount or type or timing, which we can get into, didn't work well for me. How can I experiment and adjust so that I'm keeping it in a stable range? And for individuals with diabetes, usually the peak that we're looking for is a little bit higher, right? We know that the body might have a little bit more difficulty keeping it in that stable range. So we're adjusting for that. We usually, with type 2 diabetes, we want to keep that peak below 180 and then always just work to get them lower over time, right? So you might start with a higher goal. You might just start with keeping it below 200. And then over time, as you're able to make small changes, you can get that lower. And then your average gets lower over time because you're able to make those real-time adjustments. So for someone with type 2 diabetes that maybe had that pasta, I think there are those same levers that we could pull on. I would probably look at first the composition of that meal, right? We know that adding protein to a meal can blunt your blood sugar spike. And that's because protein is slower to digest and it kind of slows down that process so that that carbohydrate has a smaller impact on your blood sugar. Carbohydrates have the biggest impact on blood sugar of all of our macronutrients. So if we can add, some fiber, vegetables, and some protein before that carbohydrate, you might be able to bring it down just a little bit, which is really awesome. Then we layer in all those other factors that I mentioned of, all right, can we adjust the portion size? Maybe this was too much of a carb for one meal for you. How can we make you feel satisfied and find the right portion? And then other types of carbohydrates. What I've noticed from looking at so many members' data is that every single person has a different response to the same food. So we have such a bio-individual response to meals that there's that factor to kind of layer into all of it. And what I would tell that person that spiked from pasta is like, can we try a different type of pasta? If you love pasta, how can we make this work for you? Maybe we can do a little bit smaller portion. We can try some high fiber pasta to see if that helps a little bit. But usually it's just making those small tweaks and then observing how that changes your glucose response and then slowly adjusting your diet over time.
I like it. So as you were talking, a question popped into my mind because, so let's say that one of the things I know is one of the reasons they ask for the fasting glucose is because they want to see how much glucose is in your system after, like, say 2 hours or something, when it should come down, right? So let's say it's staying. So someone that's got the glucose monitor, is that when they will take a pill to, like, metformin or something to get rid of the glucose? Does it work with medications?
Yeah. So it can. I think most doctors are going to go, lifestyle, diet changes first. But if they're constantly seeing that fasting glucose raise and it gets to that pre-diabetes or diabetes level, metformin is usually the first medication option. I think sometimes that can be really helpful. So you can still do both. You can still have, monitor your blood suger and take.
What the question was, is if your blood sugar is not coming down and it's staying, high, then you take a pill, right, to bring it down. Is that how that works?
Typically you can. Right. Yeah, that's usually the first line of defense if you're seeing that high fasting glucose that's just persistent. Right. The interesting thing about fasting glucose is that there are so many factors that influence fasting glucose. So what you eat, your exercise, but also stress and sleep really, really impact how your fasting glucose is trending. And of course, if you have diabetes, sometimes your fasting glucose is going to be elevated, and that's just part of the disease progression. But I think you can optimize that and kind of improve that over time by looking at stress and sleep, because they play such a huge role in that fasting glucose as well. But
Yeah,
yes.
I like that. Yes. So yeah, so this is good information. I see why that's important. And I know that Dr. Stephen Gundry recommended a continuous glucose monitor. I don't remember what was his reason, but he wasn't really talking about, I think he was trying to say to see how you react to foods, which is basically what you're saying here, how your body reacts to foods, because like you said, one of the reasons that you might be doing everything that you can and you're still not losing weight is because the way your mitochondria processes, your food, and he has a great saying that is not what you eat, but it's what your gut buddies eat. So all that, I think that's probably why he was recommending it. Now, you also talk about something that's called bariatric nutrition therapy. What is that, and how does that work with the CGM?
Yeah, so that is actually what I did before this position. So that was a couple of years ago, but I loved it. So if anyone doesn't know, bariatric nutrition, or just bariatric in general, kind of refers to either medical or surgical weight loss. So that is what I did before NutriSense. I worked with individuals that were preparing for or recovering from bariatric surgery. So that includes things like your gastric bypass, your gastric sleeve, sometimes duodenal switch. Those are kind of the 3 surgeries that we worked with. But essentially, we would, help them get their lifestyle and diet changes in place before they had that surgery, and then recover afterwards to maintain that success. And I, again, love
that's amazing.
that. I love that. Yeah.
I didn't know what that meant. So that is great, but I can see how that would work, because yes, you go in and you have the diabetic sleeve, or what, I mean, not the diabetic sleeve, the sleeve in your stomach. But then you want to be able to see how your body responds to food, because now you're only eating a small portion. So that is great. All right.
Yeah,
so,
I think CGMs could be very, very helpful for individuals throughout that process. When I was working in that position, it wasn't something that we utilized, but I think we've, through NutriSense, we've worked with a ton of people that have either had the surgery, were preparing for it. And I think just having, again, that, reminder of how your body is responding to foods, and kind of that motivational or accountability piece to stick on the habits that you're building, can really set you up for success with any weight loss plan. And I think just one thing I wanted to mention really briefly about weight loss and glucose is I think they're connected. They're not correlational, but I think they're very, very connected. So when we look at it, if we are having those larger responses to foods and our blood sugar is staying high for a really, really long time, that's telling us that we need insulin more often to bring that back down. And I always think of insulin as our body's building hormone, right? When we have insulin in the body, that's telling our brains, hey, we have fuel available for storage. We do not need to break down what we already have. We have enough fuel already. So that's essentially that signal that's telling your body not to break down fat, not to break down anything else, because we have a lot of glucose to use. And so I think kind of controlling that and making sure your blood sugar is in a stable range and you're having the right responses for you can help support that blood sugar and weight loss journey as well.
Yeah, so I can also see how it works for weight loss as well, because there's a lot of people that, including me, that think they're doing all the right things, but they're not seeing the scale go down. And this could be one tool to see how your body is processing food. There's others, like checking your hormones and all those type of things.
Wow.
But that's not the purpose of this conversation. But yeah, that's one way to find out how your body's processing food, I like it. All right.
I think we live in a time where there are a lot of recommendations around what to eat, and people will tell you different answers no matter where you turn. The keto diet is right. No, vegan diet is right? There's so much conflicting information and just nutrition noise. I always use the example of eggs, right? One day eggs are bad, one day they're the best thing ever. And so I think what happens when we have all of that noise it's really hard to know which noise to listen to, which channel to listen to, and which one's right for you, that we stop listening to our body and we stop trusting our own bodies because there's so much that we don't know. It can be overwhelming. And that's where I think any personalized nutrition or personalized medicine that can help you understand what's actually going on in your body and what's right for you is probably the future of healthcare medicine, just because, that's going to give you the answer and kind of cut through all of that.
Yeah, I like it. So yes, personalized. Yeah, because when you get this data, then, but you said you only keep it for 2 weeks. Why only 2 weeks? I thought it would be a lifetime of choice.
Well, each sensor, the sensor that we use right now, and I think the technology is expanding, it's growing, which is awesome. The technology we use right now, which is the Freestyle CGM, lasts for 2 weeks. That's just kind of the life of the device. But, there's a lot of CGM companies. Ours includes 2 CGMs per month. So you essentially get a whole month of data. You just have to switch your CGM in between that month so that you can continue monitoring. So for some people, 1 month might be perfect, right? If you just want to explore and learn, maybe that's perfect. But if you have a larger goal, weight loss or prediabetes, or you're trying to manage your own diabetes, then a longer, monthly plan might work better.
All right, so I get it. So when you have it for 2 weeks or a month, then you're eating all your foods and you're like doing research, right? Is that what you're doing? You're checking to see how, or maybe what you normally do, because everybody has like a staple set of foods that they eat. So maybe they check those, or you go to a restaurant, or maybe. So what is the way to check it for 2 weeks? Give us that instead of me blabbing.
Well, I think first off, one of the first things that happens if you put a CGM on is you get this urge to eat perfectly. I see this all the time. Like, I can't eat that because I just have to eat perfectly.
No, that's not going to do any good. You gotta see the bad stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, that's why I'm like, be curious. And I think there's sometimes this fear around seeing the data, right? Is like, what if I see the data? What if I'm spiking to my favorite foods? And I understand that, but you have to eat at least for 2 weeks. You have to eat your normal patterns, eat what you normally do all the things that are normal in your lifestyle, because then you're going to see that data and you're going to have that reminder for the rest of your life. So even if you don't wear a CGM forever, which most people don't, right? You might wear it for periods of time throughout your life just to see different seasons of your life and how your body's responding, but you'll have that data forever. And that's the power of it. So assess what you normally do 1 to 2 weeks. So maybe your first sensor, you're just getting a baseline, you're learning. And what I do, what our team of nutritionists do, and this is what I love what I do, I help people interpret that, because just from this conversation, it's a lot. Seeing that peak and the shift and how quickly it comes down. So I think having an expert there to kind of help unwrap that and untangle it with you and kind of connect it to your goals is really helpful. And then after you've established that baseline, what your normal blood sugar is, then you can start experimenting and trying different things and making small tweaks and observing how they improve your glucose, so that you have kind of a setup plan to keep you on the right path lifelong.
Well, you also did a great tip or great hack there, and I'm not sure if people noticed it, but I paid attention to it. You said that if you eat protein with your carbs, then it slows down your insulin spike. So that's pretty good. So
yes.
when you were talking, I'm thinking, okay, so I don't eat spaghetti. Rarely do I eat pasta, but there was a time when you would have spaghetti and meatballs or spaghetti and whatever when I had little kids around, because little kids seem to like that. So, and I would put like obviously the meat, but I would also put like broccoli in it. So that would be a good something that you would tell someone, because you said something with fiber as well. So you've got some fiber, and you've got the protein, and that slows down the spike. Is that a good hack?
You're on it. Yes. So the ideal format, and I know not every single meal can do this, but most of them can, right? Have your protein first. So your chicken, your plant-based protein, whatever you're having, have that protein first, because that's going to blunt your glucose spike. Then have your vegetables. So the broccoli would be perfect there. I always say a salad too, if you do, your protein on a salad, and then save your carbs for last. So later on in the meal, that's going to help improve your blood sugar response to this. So if you're having spaghetti, heck yeah, have that spaghetti right there. Or if you're having desserts, right, have your dessert last. I think that's one of the easiest and most effective hacks that anybody can apply, even if you're not monitoring with a blood sugar CGM or anything like that.
No, this is, hey, this is, if you got nothing else, this is good stuff right here, because everybody can practice that, because I never do that. I eat my carbs first. When you were growing up, did you not leave the meat for last?
I know. Yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive, right? We have tortilla chips at the start of the meal, or we have bread at Olive Garden first. So we're set up to eat actually opposite, but your blood sugar is going to do better having your protein first. And no matter where you are, if you have diabetes or you're just trying to optimize in general, that tip can be helpful. The other one that I would really, really encourage, just because we talked about your muscles or that sink for glucose, whenever you can time your higher carb meals or any meal in general around exercise, typically the better your glucose is going to respond. Because whenever you activate those muscles and you exercise, you're optimizing your insulin sensitivity and you're expanding that sink for your glucose to go into in your muscles. So this can look like, eating after your workout, timing your carbohydrate meals after your workout, or how I like to do it, walk after you eat. So I call that a postprandial walk. Go for even like a 10 to 20 minute walk afterwards can really help control that blood sugar spike.
Girl, you're giving me some good tips.
I'm here for
I
it.
exercise in the morning without eating, but then I come and I have like a protein shake. I used to walk at night. No, I don't. So now I'm going to add that in. I love that. You're giving me some good tips. And not only me, I mean, everybody that's listening, you're giving some good tips. Awesome. So before we wrap up, I want to ask you one last thing before we get to how we can get this CGM, is that you talk about the warning signs of a diabetic emergency and how it can be handled. So what is a diabetic emergency?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And I think this is important, crucial knowledge for everyone that has diabetes to know. So usually the critical emergencies that we're going to experience, I think the first one that everyone thinks of is ketoacidosis, right? And so this is when your blood sugar is going very, very high and you're unable to bring that back down. So you go into a ketoacidotic shock, or keto coma is sometimes what it's called. And so usually what will happen is you start to experience kind of a fruity breath. That's kind of the key symptom, is that if you start to get fruity breath, you feel shaky, tired, and just kind of irritable. Those are kind of the things that you notice. And then if you check your blood sugar, so I hope everyone with diabetes has a finger prick device that they carry around with them. If that is high, get yourself to a hospital right then. That is probably the most serious diabetic emergency that we see. And it can be really, really scary. It can be life-threatening. So that's the big one. Blood sugar is really, really high. You get the fruity breath. That is the keto coma. The other thing, and we kind of touched on this a little bit, is kind of a reactive hypoglycemia, or even just a hypoglycemic event. And that's when you're kind of the opposite. Your blood sugar goes very, very low and you're unable to get it back up. And those kind of exhibit the same symptoms. You might get shaky. You might feel really not great. Sometimes that hanger, you just feel fatigued, faint. Sometimes you get clammy. Those are kind of the symptoms that you might notice. But if you check your blood sugar and it's really low, so this is typically 55 or less with those symptoms, that is a sign that you have hypoglycemia. We need to address that. And that is usually addressed with what we call the 15-15 rule. So that's where you consume 15 grams of really simple carbohydrates. Think like the little glucose tablets or juice or candy, 15 grams of carbs, and then you wait 15 minutes and then you check again. If it's still low, you repeat that again. And if you are unable to get it back up, you go to the hospital for that one as well. That one's also really scary, because when you get really low blood sugar, you're unable to kind of perform normal functions like you can, right? And if we go back to what we talked about at the beginning here, you're not using your fuel, you're not able to keep your body in that homeostatic range. And that feels really, really terrible. So those are the two big ones that are probably most common, and two to look out for, especially in individuals with diabetes.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I had a friend of mine that didn't know his wife was diabetic, and I'm not sure what was her symptom, but they had to rush her to the hospital. And when they got there, her sugar was 300 and something. I think she fell into a coma or something. I don't remember, but yeah, and they had to give her insulin to,
bring that down.
the injection to bring it back down. So yeah,
That's usually
and then,
called
yeah.
DKA is kind of what it's called, like the DKA, but you're tired, you have stomach pain, you're vomiting, you can't keep food down, flush face, like that is the scary one, and that is the one that needs attention right away. So it sounds like they handled that well and they got her taken care of.
The hospital, right? Yes,
Yeah.
that's such a good question. I'm glad I asked it. All right,
Yeah.
Carlee, this has been an interesting talk. I love learning. I hope you guys are learning. I love learning too. Carlee gave us a lot of nuggets. Like we started off by saying metabolic health is very important. It's very important for longevity because how your body processes food is very important. In order for us to live, we've got to eat, and our body has to process food and produce ATPs. I'm glad that I know what that is.
Yes. I love that.
ATPs and all that stuff. So, all right, Carlee, thank you for an excellent talk here on contact. So how can listeners get access to your CGM tool? Tell us about your website and your social media handles.
Awesome. Yes. So if you want to learn more about NutriSense, CGM, so continuous glucose monitoring for proactive health, preventative health, or just, if you have prediabetes, diabetes, you can find more about us at NutriSense.io. And that is our website. We have a lot of information about our team and kind of what we offer there. But if you want to just learn more, I think we are always posting really fun stuff on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We're also on LinkedIn, so you can follow us at NutriSense.io on those as well. So I always tell people that I think, I'm really passionate about CGMs. I'm sure you know that by now. But even if you don't want to measure, your blood sugar, even if that doesn't interest you, you can still do some of the hacks that we talked about today. You can still do those things that optimize how your body's processing that fuel. So I hope this is applicable to everyone. And if you want to learn more, connect with me, you can find me on LinkedIn at Carlee Hayes.
I'm sorry. Yes, you said they can connect with you at NutriSense.io, but then you also left your personal one. So what is your personal one?
Yeah, you can just find me on LinkedIn. My name is Carlee Hayes.
Oh, okay, just on Carlee, right? Yes, I think we're connected on LinkedIn too.
Cool.
Awesome. So Carlee, this was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for an excellent interview, excellent talk. I know the things that I got out of it. Eat your protein first. Take a walk. All right. Take a walk after your meal so that you can get the insulin into those muscles, because both Peter Attia and actually I'm 3 books I'm reading. Peter Attia, I'm reading Stephen Gundry's book, I'm reading Dr. Mark Hyman's book, and they're all talking about the same thing: food for longevity, right? And that's where your metabolic health comes into play, and where insulin resistance is very, very important. Because if you're insulin resistant, then you're not processing foods, and a whole bunch of things starts happening when there's too much glucose in your blood and all that. So yeah, listen, the CGM tool is an excellent tool. I think I'm gonna get it myself, because yes, I need to know what's going on with my body and food.
Yes, we'd love to work with you on that. And there are so many other hacks that I could share. So if you ever want to continue the conversation, let me know. But I encourage everybody to just learn more. Visit us at our Instagram. We're always posting fun studies and stories. So join the conversation.
Yes, for sure. All right, guys. Well, listen, thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Transform Your Mind so you can transform your life. Today, we talked about nutrition. Today, we talked about metabolic health, which according to Dr. Peter Attia, who's getting a lot of attention on his book, Outlive, it is more important than cardiovascular health, is more important than, Alzheimer's, is more important than all the other systems. Metabolic health is the most important one. So yes, thank you, Carlee, for bringing us this conversation today about how we can take control of our metabolic health with a tool that allows us to monitor how our body processes food. So that is great. And I'm sure that because NutriSense, she's a dietitian, one of the things that we didn't talk about, but I'm almost sure that that's the end goal. After you know how your body processes food, then NutriSense will design a diet plan for you. Is that how it works?
Yeah, we have a team of nutritionists. So anyone that signs up gets a complimentary month with their nutritionist. And again, they're just kind of that guide to help them understand their data, identify maybe some tweaks to make, and then see how it works. So that takes time, and you learn as you go. But yes, 100% can help you apply what you learn for your everyday.
Yes, beautiful. All right, guys. Thank you, Carlee. Thank you guys for tuning in. And if you're listening to this on iTunes, we'd love for you to rate and review and subscribe. If you're watching this on YouTube, we'd love for you to subscribe. I bring you quality guests like Carlee every week so that you can transform your mind, so you can transform your life. Until next time, namaste.